Hey there. Tonight we'll wander back into a quieter, colder world. A world where breakfast is stew, the air tastes of wood smoke, and even your bed crunches when you roll over. So, before we begin, get yourself comfortable. Perhaps tuck in under a blanket, and if you enjoy these gentle rambles through history, you can always subscribe, but only if it feels right to you. Now close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let the frost creep in. You cough softly, waving your hand. Then remind yourself this is as good as it gets. Chimneys in most houses are less efficient funnels and more smoky suggestions. The light from the fire paints the room in uneven patches. Orange glows on one wall, deep shadows stretch on the other. Every crack in the timber beam seems to groan faintly in the cold. The floor beneath you holds the chill of the night still, creeping back into your knees as you crouch. For all the hearth's drama, it seems more decorative than effective. A reality check. Medieval fires warmed people unevenly. You roast on one side, freeze on the other. You turn your body like a spit over a slow fire, seeking balance that never truly comes. You imagine your ancestors thought it character-building. You think it mostly explains their frequent coughs. Still, there is comfort here. The crackle, however faint, breaks the silence of the morning. The glow steadies your breath, slowing the shiver in your chest. You stare into the coals, their red hearts pulsing gently, as if the fire itself breathes with you. Beside the hearth, an iron pot hangs from a hook. It smells faintly of onions and smoke, a hint of yesterday's stew that clings to the blackened metal. The pot is empty now, but you know it will soon host breakfast again. The same stew stretched with water, or perhaps a crust of bread softened into broth. The perpetual pot rarely rests. Its contents alter daily, though not always for the better. You rub your hands together once more, letting the smoke settle into your sleeves. The smell will follow you the entire day, woven into your wool, clinging stubbornly long after the fire itself dies. But for now, you lean closer, eyes watering, and let yourself pretend that warmth alone is enough. And so, with your hair smelling faintly of smoke and your fingers thawed just enough to move, you pull your cloak around your shoulders, ready to face the cold again. This time to dress yourself properly against the winter. Beyond the walls. You shuffle toward the hearth, drawn by the faint promise of warmth. The room smells of yesterday's fire, ash, damp wood, and that peculiar tang of smoke that clings to hair, clothes, and probably your soul by now. The hearth squats in the middle of the wall, blackened with soot, its stones cracked from years of heat. A small fire flickers within, more smoke than flame, and you crouch near it, hands outstretched like a supplicant before a reluctant saint. The flames lick at the logs half-heartedly, spitting now and then as damp wood resists. Your palms feel some heat, but the smoke drifts directly into your face, making your eyes sting and your nose prickle. You cough softly, waving your hand, then remind yourself this is as good as it gets. Chimneys in most houses are less efficient funnels and more smoky suggestions. The light from the fire paints the room in uneven patches. Orange glows on one wall, deep shadows stretch on the other side. Every crack in the timber beams seems to groan faintly in the cold. The floor beneath you holds the chill of the night still, creeping back into your knees as you crouch. For all the hearth's drama, it seems more decorative than effective. A reality check. Medieval fires warmed people unevenly. You roast on one side, freeze on the other side. You turn your body like a spit over a slow fire, seeking balance that never truly comes. You imagine your ancestors thought it character-building. You think it mostly explains their frequent coughs. Still, there is comfort here. The crackle, however faint, breaks the silence of the morning. The glow steadies your breath, slowing the shiver in your chest. You stare into the coals, their red hearts pulsing gently, as if the fire itself breathes with you. Beside the hearth, an iron pot hangs from a hook. It smells faintly of onions and smoke, a hint of yesterday's stew that clings to the blackened metal. The pot is empty now, but you know it will soon host breakfast again. The same stew, stretched with water, or perhaps a crust of bread softened into broth. The perpetual pot rarely rests, its contents altered daily, though not always for the better. You rub your hands together once more, letting the smoke settle into your sleeves. The smell will follow you the entire day, woven into your wool, clinging stubbornly long after the fire itself dies. But for now you lean closer, eyes watering, and let yourself pretend that warmth alone is enough. You wake to the sting of winter air pressing through the wooden shutters. The gaps let in more than light. They let in icy drafts that curl across your face and settle in your ears. Your breath mists faintly in the dim room, small clouds rising like whispers into the gloom. Is morning, though it feels as though night never truly left. You curl tighter under the wool blanket, the rough weave scratching against your chin. And so, with your hair smelling faintly of smoke, and your fingers thawed just enough to move, you pull your cloak around your shoulders, ready to face the cold again, this time to dress yourself properly against the winter. Beyond the walls. You push open the door and step into the morning, and the cold greets you like an old adversary. The air is sharp, each breath stinging the inside of your nose. Frost crunches underfoot, a brittle chorus that announces your every step to the still sleeping street. The road ahead is little more than a mixture of frozen mud and yesterday's refuse. In medieval towns, streets doubled as sewers, so what froze overnight is an unpredictable mosaic of ice, muck, and mystery. You step carefully, your leather shoes offering little grip, and you tell yourself that slipping here would be both embarrassing and unhygienic in equal measure. The buildings lean in close, their upper stories jutting over the street as though eavesdropping. Icicles hang from their wooden beams, dripping slowly when the sun peeks over the horizon. One drop splashes on your hood, cold enough to remind you of gravity's peculiar sense of humor. The air carries a mingled scent, wood smoke curling from chimneys, damp straw trodden into the street, and the faint tang of horses that passed in the night. It is not fresh in any modern sense, yet it is the fragrance of a living town, a sign that life stirs even beneath the frost. You pass a cart left in the road, its wheels frozen fast into the muck. A dog trots by, nose to the ground, pausing to sniff before darting off after some unseen prize. A woman at a doorway beats a rug, sending a puff of dust into the air that sparkles briefly in the pale sun. The sound echoes between timber walls, breaking the silence of the morning with its steady rhythm. A reality check. Cobbled streets exist only in wealthier quarters. Here, the pavement is nature's own. Mud in summer, ice in winter. You pick your way forward gingerly, lifting your cloak's hem to keep it from dragging through questionable patches. You remind yourself that dry wool is worth the effort. A man carrying firewood nods as he passes, his arms straining under the weight of logs bound by rope. The scent of fresh-cut pine follows him, a sharp sweetness that briefly masks the less charming smells of the street. You envy his burden. At least firewood promises warmth once it burns. Your stomach rumbles again, louder this time in the quiet air. The thought of stew, hot, thick, and steaming, spurs your steps forward. Somewhere nearby, behind shuttered windows, a tavern hearth is already glowing, its pot suspended and ready to welcome whatever the morning provides. You quicken your pace, boots slipping just enough to remind you to tread carefully. The sun climbs slowly above the rooftops, washing the icy road in pale gold. Dot ahead, comma. You catch sight of a wooden sign swaying gently in the breeze, the mark of the tavern. And so, with your breath fogging before you and the smell of wood smoke teasing your nose, you press on toward the tavern door, where warmth, noise, and the peculiar comfort of winter stew are waiting to embrace you. It smells faintly of smoke from the hearth and of lanolin from the sheep it once belonged to. The warmth is patchy at best, but enough to make leaving the palate feel like betrayal. Still, comma. The cold insists. The straw beneath you rustles as you shift. It creaks and squeaks, a dry chorus that fills the silence. Some stalks jab through the thin sack, prodding your ribs and hips with unhelpful enthusiasm. The bed is not a luxury. It is a reminder of humility. Though perhaps humility would be easier without so many sharp edges. Your stomach interrupts with a growl, a hollow reminder that yesterday's bread was thin and the stew was thinner. Hunger in winter is no stranger here. Food stocks grow low, root cellars dwindle, and the next meal is often whatever can be coaxed from a pot over the fire. You rub your hands together, more for the sound than the heat, and wonder if your belly's protest is louder than the straw beneath you. A reality check. Medieval homes often froze indoors. Windows were shuttered, chimneys smoked badly, and frost traced patterns on the inside walls. You sit up slowly, watching your own breath rise before you like a pale ghost. Some claimed such frosty mornings kept the spirit sharp. You decide it mostly keeps fingers numb. You swing your legs from the pallet, your bare feet finding the stone floor. It is icy to the touch, and you draw in a sharp breath as if the ground itself has teeth. You reach for your tunic, still heavy and faintly damp from yesterday's snow. Wool holds its chill well, and slipping it over your shoulders feels less like dressing and more like volunteering for discomfort. The room holds little else: a stool, a small chest, a corner where tools lean like tired companions. The air is still, filled with the faint scent of last night's fire, smoke mingled with damp wood and the hint of ash. Outside you can hear the muffled call of a cock crowing in the distance, his voice rising bravely into the frozen air. It feels more like defiance than greeting. You rub your hands once more, gathering the courage to step out of your corner of warmth. Your breath fogs again, and you watch it dissolve slowly, as if time itself has slowed to match the heavy, cold. Beyond the shutters, a pale light suggests the day is waiting, though waiting is all it seems to do. And so, with your tunic pulled close and your teeth already set against the chill, you prepare to shuffle toward the hearth, where fire smolders, smoke lingers, and warmth, however uneven, promises to greet you. You shuffle toward the hearth, drawn by the faint promise of warmth. The room smells of yesterday's fire, ash, damp wood, and that peculiar tang of smoke that clings to hair, clothes, and probably your soul by now. The hearth squats in the middle of the wall, blackened with soot, its stones cracked from years of heat. A small fire flickers within, more smoke than flame, and you crouch near it, hands outstretched like a supplicant before a reluctant saint. The flames lick at the logs half-heartedly, spitting now and then as damp wood resists. Your palms feel some heat, but the smoke drifts directly into your face, making your eyes sting and your nose prickle. You push open the tavern door, and a wave of heat and smell rolls over you. The air inside is thick, smoke from the hearth tangled with the tang of ale, onions, and 100 unwashed cloaks. It is not a refined perfume, but after the biting cold of the street, it feels almost welcoming. The door creaks shut behind you, muting the frost and silence outside. Here the room hums with low voices, a murmur of traders, laborers, and travelers already huddled near the fire. Words are unnecessary here. Company is assumed the moment you sit down. The tavern keeper slaps a tankard onto the table in front of you. The pewter is dented, its rim uneven where someone's teeth once made an unfortunate acquaintance. You lift it gingerly, half expecting the handle to wobble, and smell the weak, yeasty breath of small beer. Better than water, you remind yourself, though only just. A reality check. Tavern furniture was not designed for comfort. Benches were long, backs non-existent, and tables had more wobble than stability. You shift slightly, feeling the wood dig into your thighs, and decide that the only thing keeping you in place is the anticipation of stew, and the fact that leaving would mean stepping back into the cold. Around you, the room hums. A fiddler leans against the wall, bows scraping across strings in a tune more enthusiastic than tuneful. The mason beside you joins in with a soft hum, off-key, but determined. The farmer thumps the table in rhythm, spilling a few drops of ale that soak into the grain as though the wood itself is thirsty. The smell of the hearth grows stronger. Onions, carrots, and barley blend into a fragrance that fills your chest with longing. You lean slightly, peering toward the great pot, watching as the barmaid stirs it with a ladle nearly as long as her arm. Steam curls up, carrying the promise of warmth to your frozen bones. Your stomach answers with a low growl, loud enough to make the mason glance at you with a grin. The bench shifts as more travelers squeeze in. A cloak brushes your shoulder, damp wool leaving a faint scent of sheep and frost. A pair of boots thump down across from you, mud frozen into ridges that crumble onto the floor as they thaw. The tavern grows tighter, warmer, the kind of closeness that is half comfort, half inconvenience. But at least no one is outside in the snow. The fiddler stops abruptly to sip his ale, and the sudden silence makes you realize just how loud the tavern has grown. The scrape of bowls, the rumble of laughter, the low chorus of voices sharing stories of frost, trade, and stubborn livestock. The walls, blackened by smoke, seem to hold the sound in, as if the tavern itself refuses to let the noise escape into the cold. You glance at your cloak, already marked with a small patch of spilled ale. It clings dark against the wool, a stain that will smell faintly of yeast for the rest of the week. You sigh quietly, then lift your tankard for a sip. The beer is thin, almost watery, but it carries a faint sweetness of malt, enough to make you forget for a moment the frost outside. And so, with your place claimed and your cloak already baptized in hops, you lean forward in anticipation, waiting for the barmaid to bring you a bowl of winter stew, the kind reheated, refilled, and reborn every day, and which now promises to fill both your stomach and the rest of your evening. The barmaid approaches, balancing a stack of wooden bowls with weary grace. Her sleeves are rolled high, her apron darkened with splashes of broth, and she carries the sort of expression that suggests she has already seen 3 winters' worth of trouble this morning alone. She sets a bowl before you with a dull clatter, steam rising instantly into your face, bringing with it the unmistakable perfume of onions, turnips, and barley. You lean closer, letting the heat brush against your chilled cheeks. The stew swirls thickly, its surface broken by soft hunks of root vegetables and grains that have surrendered to long boiling. A few shreds of meat float here and there, thin and stringy, the kind of meat that makes you wonder what exactly it once belonged to. You decide not to ask. Curiosity, in a tavern stew, is rarely rewarded. You dip your spoon in, its handle rough with splinters. The first mouthful is hot, almost scalding, but it coats your tongue with warmth that spreads down into your chest. The flavor is earthy, heavy with turnip, and faintly smoky from the hearth where it has bubbled for days. This is no recipe, but a tradition, the perpetual pot. A stew that is never emptied, only topped up, its history measured in layers of broth and memory. A reality check. You are not eating today's stew. The timbers overhead are dark with smoke, the rafters hung with dried herbs that sway faintly in the draft. Rosemary, sage, maybe thyme. Their scent competes bravely against the stronger odors of humanity. You pause, blinking as your eyes adjust to the dim light. The only illumination comes from the hearth and a few tallow candles, their flames flickering yellow, their smoke adding to the already hazy air. Shadows lean across the walls, stretching and bending with each movement of flame. You are eating yesterday's stew and the day before that, and perhaps a dozen dinners folded into one. It is practical, it is filling, and it is never exactly the same. A curious gamble, really. Each bite is part nourishment, part archaeological dig. You pause for a second spoonful, noting a faint tang of something unusual. A spice, perhaps. Pepper, if fortune smiled. Or simply a charred scrap of onion pretending to be exotic. You nod anyway, choosing gratitude over speculation. In winter, hot food is miracle enough. The sounds of the tavern rise around you. Tankards thud, benches creak, a laugh bursts out near the hearth somewhere, a child squeals as his father sneaks him a spoonful from his bowl. The air grows dense with steam and smoke, and you breathe it all in. A mingling of life, labor, and survival. The mason beside you slurps noisily, his spoon scraping the bottom of the bowl as if he might mine for more. The farmer tears a crust of bread and dunks it into his stew, the bread soaking quickly, becoming a soft sponge that collapses on his tongue. You follow suit, breaking your own crust and letting it sink into the broth, watching as it drinks greedily before you scoop it up. The taste is better, the bread mellowing the sharp bite of the turnip. For a brief moment you close your eyes. The warmth of the stew in your stomach, the hum of voices around you, and the weight of the cloak across your shoulders all conspire to lull you into ease. It is not comfort as you might dream it, but it is survival made pleasant, and in winter that is no small thing. And so, with your spoon clinking against the side of the bowl and the warmth spreading slowly through your limbs, you reach for your tankard, ready to wash down the stew with the weak ale that, for better or worse, is safer than any water the town could offer. You lift the tankard, its pewter rim cool against your fingers. The liquid inside sloshes faintly, amber in the candlelight. It is small beer, the everyday drink of nearly everyone, weak in alcohol but steady in purpose. Safer than water, they say, because streams and wells carry more than just freshness. So you drink, not for cheer, but for peace of mind. The first swallow is thin, watery, barely more than flavored bread. It tastes faintly sweet, faintly sour, like malt that never quite grew up. You pause, considering the effort it takes to brew something so mild. Then remind yourself that refreshing is not a medieval word. It is enough that it doesn't make you sick. A curious standard, but a practical one. The tankard is dented and heavy. Its weight makes the ale feel more important than it is, as though each sip carried dignity rather than diluted barley. You set it down, the thud echoing briefly on the scarred table. The sound merges with a dozen others, a chorus of mugs, spoons, and voices filling the smoky air. A reality check. To feel even a touch of cheer from this drink, you'd need to consume it by the gallon. Which many people did. It was breakfast, dinner, and supper all at once, fuel for labor and excuse for lingering. You glance around the room, wondering who among these faces has already reached their fourth or fifth cup, and decide it is best not to count. The farmer beside you wipes his beard with the back of his hand, his tankard already empty. He signals for another without speaking, the tavern keeper nodding in reply. The rhythm of drink is as natural here as breathing. Not indulgence, just the steady march of daily survival. Disguised in amber liquid dot, the taste lingers faintly on your tongue, a reminder of grain fields somewhere beyond the snow dot. You imagine the summer sun ripening the barley, the scythe cutting it down, the millstone grinding it into grist dot. All that labor condensed into this thin swallow, now warming your belly more with memory than with strength dot. You take another sip, slower this time. The heat of the tavern swirls around you, steam rising from bowls, laughter rising from throats dot. Your own breath fogs faintly, not from cold now, but from the mingling of ale and stew dot. For a moment, the winter outside feels less biting, as though each sip were a small shield against the frost. Dot, you lean back slightly, the bench creaking in protest dot. The fiddler starts again near the hearth, his bow squeaking across the strings in a tune meant to chase gloom away. It feels less like stepping into a room and more like stepping into a smoky dream. A reality check. Taverns were the heart of medieval towns, dot more than places for drink. They were hubs of gossip, lodging, and business deals. Dot, and yes, sometimes brawls dot. You remind yourself that sitting too close to a drunk farmer could mean wearing half his ale by accident. Dot, the sound grows clearer as you step further in. The farmer taps his empty mug in rhythm, and even the mason hums along dot. You take another swallow and decide the ale, weak as it is, works best when shared with noise and company. Dot. And so, with your tankard half drained and the taste of malt lingering faintly on your tongue, you glance toward the barmaid moving swiftly between tables, her hands balancing mugs, her eyes already weary, and prepare to notice the quiet strength of those who keep the tavern alive. You notice the barmaid weaving through the crowded room, balancing tankards with the skill of a juggler and the patience of a Saint Dot. Her apron is stained with ale, her sleeves roll to the elbow, and a wisp of hair has escaped her cap to cling damply to her cheek. Dot. She sets mugs down with a practiced thud, dodges a farmer's clumsy arm, and keeps moving as though the tavern floor were her personal stage dot. Her work is relentless. A nod here, a raised eyebrow there, all while keeping a dozen conversations in orbit dot. She bends to clear a bowl, straightens to refill a jug, and somehow manages not to spill more than a few drops dot. It is less a job, more a choreography, though one without applause dot. Women often ran taverns or worked within them. Dot wives, widows, daughters, all part of the daily business of feeding and watering a town. You know that behind the tired smile lies long labor, hauling barrels, stirring pots, counting coin late into the night dot, and her arms may ache as much as any smith's, though her craft earns fewer songs. A reality check. Her smile is not for charm, but for survival. A pleasant face oils the gears of trade, and weary travelers tip more readily when met with cheer. You wonder how many times today she has forced laughter at the same stale joke, and you decide not to test her patience by offering another dot. She stops at your table, sets down a fresh tankard with a dull clunk, and wipes the rim with a rag that has seen better days dot. Her eyes flick over you briefly, assessing without judgment. Already moving on to the next customer before you can thank her dot. Her presence lingers, though, a reminder that the tavern runs on more than firewood and barley. The mason beside you raises his mug in her direction, his grin broad, his voice too loud. Dot? She answers with a polite nod, then slips away before his cheer turns into clumsy familiarity dot. The farmer chuckles, murmuring something about how women keep the world upright. You think he may be right, though you keep the thought to yourself dot. The fiddler changes tune, a quicker rhythm that sets the room to tapping. The barmaid moves in time without meaning to, her steps falling with the music as she carries yet another tray dot. Her presence threads the tavern together, a rhythm as steady as the fire, a quiet strength holding chaos at bay. Dot. You take another sip of your ale, the malt now warmer on your tongue. Across the room, she bends to comfort a child fidgeting on a bench, sliding a piece of bread into his hand before returning to her endless circuit. You realize the tavern's hum is not just mugs and spoons, but her constant motion, steady as a heartbeat. And so, with your eyes following her retreat back toward the hearth, you notice the noise swelling around you. Merchants arguing, voices rising, and a fiddler's tune that screeches just a little too close to your ear. You lean back slightly on the bench, the wood pressing into your spine, and let your ears wander through the tavern's noise. Two merchants sit at the next table, their cloaks spread wide as though territory were being claimed. They argue over wool prices, voices rising above the din, each pounding the table for emphasis until the candles flicker. Their words mingle with the fiddler's tune, a sharp screech of bow against string that saws at your ears like a blunt knife. The fiddler himself is lost in the rhythm, one foot stamping hard enough to rattle the mugs nearby. His cap slips sideways on his head, and sweat glistens on his brow despite the winter cold outside. You wonder if he plays for coin, for ale, or simply for the excuse to drown out the merchants. If so, he is succeeding, though not in the way you would have hoped. The smells swirl thicker now, meat in the stew pot releasing a fatty sweetness, ale foaming over tankards, and the ever-present undercurrent of damp wool steaming near the fire. The air is so dense it feels chewable. Tankards thud onto tables, benches scrape across the floor, and somewhere near the hearth someone coughs, a deep, chesty cough that suggests he's been practicing it all winter. The laughter that follows is tired but warm, the laughter of people glad to have walls between them and the icy night. Your nose picks out details in the stew of smells. Ale, sour, and yeasty. Meat, faintly spiced, drifting from the pot over the fire. You shift slightly, adjusting your cloak to find a patch of fabric less soaked in scent. It doesn't help much. A reality check. Medieval taverns were not quiet corners of contemplation. They were noisy, smoky, bustling with life. A single evening here could give you both a headache and a week's worth of news. And tonight you seem destined for both. One merchant slams his palm on the table, declaring loudly that his sheep yield the finest fleece in 3 shires. The other snorts so hard you fear for his nose, then launches into a tale of dye prices that would make a bishop wince. Around them, others cheer or jeer, because in a tavern, someone else's argument is often the evening's entertainment. The fiddler, undeterred, drags his bow harder across the strings. The note wavers alarmingly, then settles into a melody so shrill that you wince despite yourself. The farmer beside you laughs, thumping the table in time with the music. Your stew shivers with each beat, and you begin to wonder whether eating in peace is a lost cause. Still, there is a peculiar comfort in the chaos. The merchant's quarrel is predictable, the fiddler's tune oddly reassuring in its persistence. It is messy, loud, and smoky, but it is also warmth, company, and life, pressed close together. And for a winter night, that is enough. You take another spoonful of stew, letting the warmth steady you against the rising clamor. Voices, music, smells, all blur together until they feel less like noise and more like a single living thing. You sail slowly and let yourself sink into the hum. And so, with the fiddler scraping ever closer to your ears and the merchants drumming louder than your stomach, you glance toward the hearth, just in time to overhear a whispered tale of a man who failed to pay his bill and the punishment that awaited him outside in the stocks. And beneath it all, the unmistakable musk of damp wool cloaks steaming dry in the heat. You tug at your own cloak, half tempted to join the chorus of smells, half embarrassed to add your own note. The tavern keeper stands behind the counter, a man with shoulders like barrels and an apron that has seen better decades. He wipes a tankard with a rag that looks no cleaner than the tankard itself. His eyes flick up as you enter, measuring you in a single glance. Not hostile, just calculating. Assessing how much coin your pouch might hold, and how much of it he can coax into his till tonight. You catch sight of the hearth. Its flames roar, fed generously with logs, and above it a great iron pot hangs from a hook. Steam curls upward in fragrant ribbons. This, you know, is the tavern's true treasure, the perpetual stew, thickened by days of additions, never truly emptied, never entirely new. A pot that has welcomed carrots, barley, scraps of mutton, and perhaps whatever the butcher had trouble selling out of the room beckons. Benches stretch along heavy wooden tables, scarred by years of knives, tankards, and impatient fists. You can already feel the wood beneath you, sticky in patches from spilled ale, smooth in others where countless sleeves have polished it clean. It is not elegant, but it is where warmth, food, and stories will meet you tonight. And so, with smoke curling in your hair and the promise of stew drawing you closer, you search for a place to sit, a spot on a rough bench that may leave you smelling of hops, but will at least bring you nearer to the fire. You slide onto a long bench, the wood creaking beneath you. The surface is uneven, polished by decades of elbows and mugs, yet still sticky in patches where last night's ale has dried into a kind of medieval varnish. Your cloak brushes the table, and you realize quickly that whatever touches this wood will smell faintly of hops until the thaw of spring. The bench is crowded already. To your left sits a mason with hands so rough they could sand timber without a tool. To your right, a farmer with straw clinging stubbornly to his boots. They nod in your direction, a silent acknowledgement that you now share in the warmth of the fire and the fumes of the stew. You shift on the bench, and the story drifts to you from the next table. A pair of carters lean close, their voices pitched low but eager, telling the tale of a fellow who once left this very tavern without settling his bill. The listeners huddle nearer, not because the tale is secret, but because a good punishment story deserves proper attention. The man, they say, tried to slip out after a night of ale and stew, his purse conveniently forgotten. He didn't get far. Instead, you breathe the raw scent of wood smoke drifting from chimneys, mingled with the sharper tang of frozen dung beneath the snow. The mix is peculiar, but at least it is clean in its honesty. There is no mistaking what winter preserves. A reality check. Fresh air in medieval towns was relative. Better than the smoky indoors, but still flavored with the labors of people and beasts sharing the same streets. You pull your cloak tighter, trying to catch a pocket of warmth against your chest, and marvel at how thin the barrier is between comfort and cold. The moon sits low, its pale light tracing the edges of rooftops and icicles. Snow piled at doorways reflects the glow, casting the whole street in a quiet silver. Your footsteps sound far too loud in the stillness, each crunch echoing off the timbered walls. Somewhere a dog barks, sharp and sudden. Then the silence closes again as if nothing happened. You pause to rub your hands together, your fingers stiff from the chill. The skin feels dry, almost brittle, as though it might crack like the ice beneath your boots. You blow warm breath into your palms, watching it vanish instantly into the dark. The tavern's smoky heat calls to you from behind the door, but you linger, if only to remind yourself how much worse things could feel without it. In the distance, the faint toll of a church bell drifts through the night. Its sound is slow, heavy, marking the hour with solemn patience. The tone fades into the crisp air, leaving only the whisper of wind through the alleys. You draw a deep breath, the cold searing your throat, and decide that you've had your fill of honesty. From winter's breath. You turn back toward the tavern, the glow of firelight spilling faintly through the shutters. Already you can hear muffled laughter, the scrape of benches, and the fiddle's scratchy persistence. The thought of stew, of ale, of company, pulls you forward like a promise, Dot. And so, with frost clinging to your cloak and the sting of cold sharp in your memory, you step back inside, where the stew still bubbles. The air is thick with spice and smoke, and a peculiar flavor waits to surprise your tongue, Dot. You return to your place at the bench, cheeks flushed from the cold. The sudden weight of the tavern's air presses on you again, heavy with smoke, stew, and voices. Dot. Steam from the great pot curls upward, a ribbon of warmth that seems almost alive, drawing everyone back toward the hearth. Dot. You dip your spoon once more, but tonight the stew tastes slightly different. Though the familiar onion and turnip remain, but now there's a sharp, peppery bite at the edge of the flavor. Dot. You pause, letting it linger on your tongue. Dot. Could it be a spice? In a tavern like this, it feels almost improbable. Dot. Spices were costly imports, carried by traders across seas and deserts, each grain of pepper worth its weight in stories. Dot. To taste even a hint here feels like stepping briefly into a lord's kitchen. Dot. Yet you glance at the fire and notice ash drifting down from the logs, and a suspicion creeps in. Perhaps your exotic flavor is nothing more than yesterday's charcoal, seasoning the pot by accident. The mason beside you slurps happily, clearly unconcerned with whether his stew is flavored by pepper or soot. Dot. The farmer dunks his bread again, soaking up the broth with the urgency of a man who cares little for subtleties. Dot. You follow suit, telling yourself that ash or spice, the heat alone is worth savoring. A reality check. Medieval cooks did stretch their flavors. Dot. Sometimes saffron gilded a feast, sometimes mustard seeds bit at the tongue. But for most, the spice was more likely smoke, clinging to every morsel as the hearth worked its will. Dot. You decide that mystery can be its own seasoning, and take another spoonful with cautious optimism. Dot. The barmaid glides past again, ladle in hand, adding a splash more broth to a merchant's bowl. Dot. Her apron bears a new stain, a dark patch where the pot splashed too high. She doesn't pause to wipe it, just moves on, and you marvel at her ability to stir half a cauldron of history into every bowl without comment. Dot. You could close your eyes briefly as the warmth spreads through you. Dot. The peculiar taste lingers faintly, spicy if you choose to believe, sooty if you do not. Dot. Either way, it carries comfort, a reminder that in winter, variety need not be perfect to feel precious. Dot. The fiddler's tune changes again, this time slower, almost mournful. The tavern keeper called the watch, and by dawn the debtor sat in the stocks in the marketplace, his ankles and wrists locked into wooden boards. Dot. Children threw snowballs at him. Adults muttered about honesty, and one baker supposedly tossed a stale loaf that hit him square on the ear. Dot. You spoon up another mouthful of stew, the warmth contrasting oddly with the image of icy humiliation. Dot. Stocks were not cruel in the bloody sense, but they were punishing enough in winter. The room softens with it, voices dipping, spoons clinking more gently. Dot. Even the merchants seem quieter, perhaps soothed by the idea that their supper tastes vaguely expensive. Dot. And so, with the taste of spice, or ash, still tingling on your tongue, you glance at the stranger now settling beside you, a traveling minstrel with a ragged smile, ready to share a peculiar belief that stew in all its forms can cure nearly every ill. You shift along the bench as a traveling minstrel squeezes in beside you, his cloak patched in too many places to count, and his smile missing nearly as many teeth. Dot. He carries a lute strapped to his back, its wood scratched and dulled by years of use, but his eyes glint with the energy of someone who survives on charm as much as coin. Dot. He dips his spoon into the pot with unhurried confidence, as though stew in taverns across the land is his birthright. Slurping noisily, he sighs and declares with grand certainty, "Stew, my friend, cures all illness." You glance at him sidelong, unsure whether he means it as jest or gospel. Dot. His expression suggests he means both. Minstrels carried more than music. They carried tales, gossip, and peculiar remedies picked up in one town and passed to the next. This one insists that a bowl of hot broth can cure coughs, chase fevers, and mend a weary heart. You nod politely, though you suspect his advice may be worth about as much as the teeth he's lost. Still, in winter, hope itself can be a kind of medicine. A reality check. Medieval medicine was often culinary. Spices were thought to balance the humors, wine to cleanse the blood, and broth to restore strength. You recall Brother Matthew's mystery rash, and wonder if stew ever truly cured anything, aside from hunger, of course. The minstrel launches into a story between spoonfuls, describing how in another town a dying man rose from his bed after tasting leek stew. You raise an eyebrow, but he waves your doubt away with his spoon, broth dripping onto the table. The miracle, he says, was not the leek. It was the second bowl. Around you, the tavern leans in. Travelers, merchants, farmers, all nodding along, some chuckling, others swearing they too have known stew to heal. The farmer beside you adds that his grandmother once used pottage against the plague. The mason guffaws, declaring he's still alive, which must prove something. Laughter rises like smoke, and the fiddler punctuates it with a bright, cheerful chord. You take another sip of your own broth, letting the warmth slip down your throat. It doesn't feel miraculous, but it does soften the ache in your fingers and hush the hollow in your belly. Perhaps that is all the healing one can reasonably ask of food. The minstrel leans closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Mark my words, he says. 3 bowls of stew and not even winter itself can touch you. He pats his belly with exaggerated pride, then returns to eating with gusto while you smile faintly, deciding that belief may indeed be the strongest ingredient in the pot. And so, with the minstrel's peculiar wisdom still echoing in your ears and laughter rolling through the smoky air, you wipe your mouth on your sleeve. Because napkins are a luxury here, and the tavern has other priorities than linen. You set your spoon down for a moment and glance around the table. There are no napkins here, no folded cloths waiting to rescue your chin. So you do what everyone else does, wipe your mouth with the back of your sleeve. The wool is rough, scratchy, and already darkened from earlier attempts. It leaves a faint smear of stew across your arm, but at least your face feels respectable again. The farmer beside you does the same, dragging his cuff across his beard with cheerful indifference. The mason doesn't even bother. He simply licks his fingers and returns to his bowl. In a place like this, manners are not measured in etiquette, but in whether or not you spill someone else's ale. Hygiene, such as it was, rarely extended to the tavern table. Hands were washed perfunctorily, if at all, in cold basins that did little more than rearrange the dirt. The idea of soap at supper would have been laughable, a luxury fit for nobles, not for laborers and travelers with frost still clinging to their boots. A reality check. This is how mystery rashes begin. You think briefly of Brother Matthew, whose arm once blossomed in angry red blotches after too many suppers just like this. Hours spent in the cold, hands and feet bound, with every passerby free to add insult, or snow, to injury. You decide, quite firmly, that paying your tab is an excellent investment in comfort. A reality check. Taverns were licensed spaces, and debts here were serious matters. Skip a bill, cheat a measure, and your reputation could curdle faster than milk left by the hearth. No one could decide whether it was punishment from heaven or simply stew shared with the wrong spoon. Either way, he's scratched for weeks. You rub at your sleeve again, trying to find a cleaner patch. The wool is stiff where stew has dried into it, crunching faintly under your fingers. You sigh softly, accepting that tomorrow your cloak will carry the memory of tonight's meal as stubbornly as your stomach does. Across the room, the barmaid gathers bowls with a practiced sweep, her rag tucked into her apron string. She pays no mind to the mess, for the tables will be scrubbed down with water later, And that will be good enough. Dot. The mingled smells of onion, ale, and damp wood are not easily washed away, cause they are part of the tavern's very timbers. Dot. The fiddler plays a softer tune now, a lull between songs, his bow gliding more gently across the strings. The voices around you drop lower, as if the whole room exhales together. Dot. You take another sip from your tankard, the weak ale rinsing stew from your teeth, and lean back just enough to feel the bench groan beneath you. Dot. For a moment, you feel the peculiar peace of the tavern, a smoky, noisy, messy peace, where sleeves are napkins and wood smoke is perfume. Dot. It is not refinement, but it is fellowship, and that is its own comfort. And so, with your sleeve damp and your stomach steady, you glance toward the tavern keeper waiting behind the counter, your pouch of coins suddenly feeling lighter, for soon it will be his turn to claim his share of the evening. Dot. You reach for your pouch, the leather soft from years of use, and weigh it briefly in your palm. Dot. The coins inside clink softly, a modest sound, yet one that will dwindle the moment you rise from the bench. The tavern keeper watches from behind the counter, arms folded across his barrel chest, his apron streaked with broth and grease. Dot. His gaze is not unfriendly, but it is sharp. A man who knows every coin that passes through his door. Dot. You stand, sliding the pouch open with your thumb. Dot. The coins are cool against your fingers, each one worn smooth from countless hands. Dot. You select a small silver penny, placing it onto the counter where it rings faintly in the smoky air. The tavern keeper sweeps it up at once, vanishing it into the folds of his apron with the grace of a magician. A reality check. Tavern accounts were rarely precise. Dot. No. Chalk marks, no neat ledgers for common patrons. Dot. The keeper's memory, or perhaps his whim, was often the measure of your debt. Dot. You hope tonight's stew and ale were worth no more than your coin. Dot. But in truth, you suspect you have just paid for supper, his candle, and perhaps part of the fiddler's bowstring. The barmaid passes behind you, dropping a quiet "thank you" with a nod, her hands still full of mugs. Dot. Her voice is tired, yet carries a hint of relief that another bowl has been accounted for. Dot. Payment keeps the tavern's doors open, the fire stoked, and her tray moving from table to table. Dot. You tuck the pouch back onto your belt, its weight lighter now, but your conscience settled. Dot. Better a thin purse than a night in the stocks, where snow and jeers would keep you company. The memory of the earlier story is enough to make you shiver. Dot. The tavern keeper nods once, already turning to fill another mug for a thirsty farmer. Dot. The moment is over quickly, business as brisk as the winter wind outside. Dot. For him, your penny is a drop in an endless stream. Dot. For you, it is supper well earned, and a night of warmth to remember when the frost presses close again. You glance back at your bench, where the mason now snores into his empty mug and the farmer argues amiably with the minstrel. Dot. The fiddler scrapes out another tune, his bow dancing as though powered by ale alone. Dot. Life hums on, steady as the smoke curling toward the rafters. Dot. You pull your cloak tighter, the smell of stew and hops clinging to it now like stubborn companions. Dot. To the door looms ahead, its seams glowing faintly where cold air leaks through. Beyond it lies the night, with streets silvered in frost and shadows deepened by moonlight. Dot. And so, with your pouch a little lighter and your belly a little fuller, you push open the tavern door once more, ready to stumble home through icy streets where your breath will fog and every shadow might hide a thief with colder hands than yours. Dot. You step back into the night, the tavern door closing behind you with a heavy thud. It wasn't just the tavern keeper you offended, Phil. It was the whole network of neighbors who trusted coin and custom to keep them fed. Dot. The carters laugh as they recall the tale, their mugs clinking together in satisfaction. Dot. One wipes foam from his beard and mutters that the man deserved worse. Dot. The other suggests the stocks should have been left in place for 2 nights, so he'd learn the value of a penny. The sudden quiet wraps around you like a blanket of frost. No fiddle, no laughter, no clinking mugs, only the crunch of your own boots on the frozen road. Your breath pours out in clouds, curling upward toward the pale disk of the moon. The street is silvered with ice, each cobblestone slick and gleaming. You tread carefully, cloak pulled tight, the hem brushing snow that clings stubbornly to the ground. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once, its echo carrying through the narrow lanes, then all is still again. Shadows lean long from the crooked houses. Their upper stories jut overhead, blocking half the sky, timbers groaning softly in the cold. Icicles dangle from the eaves, glittering like glass knives in the moonlight. One falls nearby with a brittle crack, shattering into a spray of frost that sparkles briefly, then vanishes into silence. A reality check. Thieves are as much a part of winter nights as frost. You keep one hand near your pouch, fingers brushing the worn leather, the memory of its lighter weight reminding you how dearly you paid for warmth. Every corner feels like it might conceal a shadow, too solid, a figure waiting for clumsy boots and careless purses. But the street remains empty, its only companion the echo of your own careful steps. The cold bites at your nose and seeps through the cracks in your shoes. Your toes grow numb, your fingers stiff even inside the folds of your cloak. You blow warm breath into your cupped hands, watching the steam drift away almost instantly. The tavern's smoky air lingers on your cloak, a stubborn reminder of stew and ale now locked in memory. The moonlight bathes the road ahead, guiding you along the familiar path home. Snow crunches underfoot, crisp and hollow, a rhythm that feels steadying after the tavern's chaos. You glance once over your shoulder, seeing the faint glow of firelight leaking through the tavern shutters. It seems smaller now, a pocket of warmth shrinking into the distance. Your breath grows heavier with each step, the cold pulling at your chest like an insistent hand. Still, the thought of straw and wool waiting for you keeps you moving. Not comfort exactly, but a promise of rest, and perhaps even dreams less chilly than the road. The town lies hushed, its people curled in beds behind shuttered windows, fires dimming to coals. Only you, and perhaps the moon, remain awake to walk this path. Your boots slip slightly on a patch of ice, and you steady yourself with a muttered thought, better bruised pride than bruised bone. And so, with the night's frost glittering at your feet and your cloak stiff with cold, you find your way homeward, toward the straw pallet that waits in silence, and the final warmth of sleep at the close of a winter's day. You push open your door, the wood groaning as though it resents the cold slipping in with you. Inside, The air is still and heavy, touched faintly by the scent of smoke long since faded. The warmth of the tavern has drained from your cloak, leaving only its stubborn perfume of hops and onions to remind you of supper. You let the door fall shut behind you, sealing out the silver quiet of the night. Your straw pallet waits in the corner, a rough sack lumpy with stalks that crunch and shift as you draw near. The blanket lies crumpled at its foot, wool stiff with the damp of winter and the weight of many nights before. You sit down slowly, the straw whispering against itself, sharp ends pricking faintly at your side. Yet even with its scratches, it feels like a refuge. That you stretch your legs, toes tingling as blood returns after the icy walk. Your fingers fumble at the knots of your belt, loosening pouch and cloak until both slide away into the shadows. The silence deepens, broken only by the rustle of straw and the occasional crack of timber shifting in the frost. You draw the blanket over you, its weight settling like a tired animal across your shoulders. A reality check. Medieval beds were not places of luxury. No feathers, no soft pillows, just straw sacks that grew flatter and itchier with every passing week. Yet compared to the frozen street, this scratchy corner is a kind of miracle. You curl into it, letting the coarse wool scratch at your cheek, and remind yourself that warmth is relative, and tonight you have enough. Their voices grow louder with each swallow of ale, the story swelling into a half-comedy, half-warning for anyone listening. The fiddler strikes a livelier tune, as though the tale itself has lifted the room's mood. The merchants pause their quarrel to chuckle, and even the barmaid smirks as she passes, perhaps remembering her own amusement at that long-ago spectacle. Stories, after all, stretch beyond their moment. Your stomach hums softly with the memory of stew and ale. Not quite full, but no longer empty. A middle ground of contentment. The faint burn of spice, or was it ash, still lingers at the back of your throat. Even peculiar flavors become comfort when paired with firelight and fellowship. You smile faintly at the thought, then sigh as your breath warms the wool pulled close to your chin. The room is dark, save for the sliver of moonlight sneaking through a gap in the shutters. It paints a pale stripe across the floor, catching on the edge of your chest, on the worn grain of the stool, and then fading into shadow. The rest of the room is quiet. A hush that feels thicker than the blanket itself. You close your eyes, your body sinking slowly into the uneven straw. The cold still presses in at the edges, but the stew in your belly spreads its memory of heat. The sounds of the tavern echo faintly in your mind. Laughter, fiddles, the scrape of spoons. They fade as you drift deeper, becoming softer, slower, until they are no more than murmurs folded into sleep. Your breathing steadies. Each exhale clouds faintly in the air, vanishing into the dark before it touches the walls. Outside. The night deepens, moonlight sliding slowly toward dawn. Inside, you let the heaviness of rest carry you, your body surrendering to the rhythm of sleep, your mind wrapped in the warmth of stew, ale, and straw. And so, with your blanket pulled close and the memory of warmth lingering, you drift into slumber. A quiet end to a winter's day where tomorrow's stew will wait to greet you again. End of script. Sweet dreams. They ripple outward, warming a dozen nights long after the original stew has gone cold. You take another sip of ale, the thin malt washing the turnip from your tongue. The sound of laughter and fiddle rises higher, a tide of merriment that drowns out the harshness of the story. You tuck the lesson into your thoughts. Never leave a tavern poorer in honesty than in coin. The door creaks open suddenly, and a blast of cold air swirls into the room. A traveler steps in, stomping snow from his boots, bringing with him the sharp reminder of the world outside. You shiver despite the fire, and glance toward the window, where frost clings thick to the glass. And so, with the tale of the unpaid tab still echoing in your ears, and the cold air biting at your ankles, you imagine stepping outside for just a moment, to breathe winter's sharp air and remember why the tavern's smoky warmth feels like salvation. You slip outside for a moment, tugging your cloak close as the tavern door swings shut behind you. The warmth and noise vanish instantly, replaced by a silence so sharp it seems to hum in your ears. The night air bites at your face, stinging your nose and cheeks until they feel raw. Your breath pours out in great white clouds, drifting upward like smoke from a hidden fire. The street is still, glazed in frost that glitters faintly in the moonlight. Every cobblestone shines with a thin crust of ice, turning the road into a treacherous mirror. You plant your feet carefully, your boots crunching with each step, and wonder how many ankles this winter has claimed already. A wagon wheel frozen into the muck leans crooked by the roadside, a reminder that even carts can be trapped when the frost decides to hold them hostage. The air smells different here. Gone is the stew of onions, beer, and wool that filled the tavern.